The quantum communication array at the United Earth Council's primary orbital station went silent with a suddenness that defied explanation. Senior Communications Officer Aria Meta's fingers froze over the holographic controls, her dark eyes widening as the network map dissolved into a cascade of error signals. "Something's wrong," she muttered, her voice barely audible above the low hum of sophisticated equipment. Outside the station's reinforced viewports, space transformed. What seemed like a momentary distortion of starlight quickly resolved into something more terrifying. Massive vessels materialized, not with the gentle transition of traditional faster-than-light travel, but with a violent quantum tear that momentarily warped the fabric of space itself. The Krillak ships were nothing like human design. Organic and angular simultaneously, they resembled massive metallic organisms more than constructed vessels. Biomechanical tendrils pulsed along their hulls, creating an illusion of breathing, living machines. Captain Elena Rodriguez was in mid-briefing when the first energy signatures appeared. Her augmented combat implants, a recent upgrade from experimental military tech, began sending rapid-fire threat assessments directly to her neural network. Before the station's alarms could sound, she was already moving. "Lockdown protocols. Now," she barked, her voice cutting through the growing chaos. Thousands of kilometers below, in Jakarta's underground defense complex, Dr. Marcus Chen watched real-time data streams that told a story of impossible technological intrusion. The Krillaks weren't just attacking, they were simultaneously disrupting every major communication and defense network with a precision that suggested they'd been studying humanity for far longer than anyone had suspected. "This isn't an invasion," Chen muttered, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "This is surgical dismemberment." The first wave struck with calculated brutality. Orbital defense platforms, humanity's first line of protection, were neutralized not through overwhelming firepower, but through an elegant computational warfare that turned their own systems against them. Targeting computers went dark. Weapon systems became useless complex sculptures of frozen circuitry. Sergeant Kyle Armstrong was on routine patrol in the Arctic Research Station when the first ground-based energy signatures appeared. Unlike the orbital teams, ground forces had milliseconds of warning. Armstrong's combat training kicked in immediately, recognizing the tactical impossibility of their situation. "Everyone to defensive positions," he shouted, already moving to secure critical research data. Whatever was coming, humanity would not lose its accumulated knowledge without a fight. The invasion wasn't just a military operation. It was a comprehensive assault designed to demonstrate the absolute technological superiority of the Krillak's hegemony. Cities didn't burn. They were systematically deconstructed. Communication networks didn't crash. They were methodically unraveled. In those first critical hours, humanity faced an enemy that didn't just want to conquer. They wanted to demonstrate the futility of resistance. But they hadn't counted on human unpredictability. The abandoned maglev tunnel beneath Sao Paulo had become something entirely unexpected. A nerve center of human resistance. Holographic displays flickered between captured Krillak's communication fragments, satellite imagery, and rapidly changing tactical maps. Dr. Marcus Chen looked more like a wild-eyed prophet than a scientist, his lab coat torn and covered in dried mud and circuitry fragments. "They're not just invaders," Chen muttered to Elena Rodriguez, who was carefully dismantling a Krillak's communication device. "They're architects of systematic suppression." Rodriguez's hands moved with surgical precision. Each component of the alien technology told a story. A language of invasion written in quantum circuits and bioengineered metal alloys. Her combat implants, now jury-rigged to interface with alien tech, translated fragments of intercepted communications. Across the world, similar scenes played out. In the Canadian Rockies, Sergeant Kyle Armstrong had transformed a former research outpost into a training ground. Survivors weren't just refugees, they were becoming something new. Military personnel, scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens were being forged into an unconventional fighting force. Traditional military doctrine is dead, Armstrong told a group of survivors, engineers, teachers, farmers, who now learned combat and technological adaptation. We're writing new rules of engagement. A young woman named Zora, formerly a quantum computing researcher, demonstrated how they'd begun repurposing Krillak's communication frequencies. Her hands danced over a cobbled-together interface that looked like it was assembled from spare parts of smartphones, military radios, and alien technology. Their communication network is a double-edged sword, she explained. Every frequency they use is a potential vulnerability. In orbit, the remains of human space infrastructure became something entirely different. Damaged satellites were now relay points for a decentralized communication network. No single point of failure could shut down human communication, a deliberate strategy born of necessity. Ken's most critical discovery wasn't a weapon, but a pattern. The Krillak's invasion followed a precise computational model, which meant it could be predicted, and more importantly, disrupted. They believe in absolute control, Chen explained to Rodriguez, pulling up complex holographic models. But control requires predictability, and humans, we're anything but predictable. An encrypted transmission came through, a patchwork of audio, visual, and data fragments from resistance cells across the globe. Each message was a defiance, a statement that humanity hadn't been defeated, merely forced underground. Sergeant Armstrong received a coded message from a resistance cell in Tokyo. They'd managed to capture and partially decode a Krillak's tactical drone. Not for destruction, but for understanding. Rodriguez looked at the growing network of resistance fighters, scientists becoming warriors, civilians becoming strategists. The invasion hadn't broken humanity. It had transformed them. We're not just fighting a war, she said quietly, looking at the holographic map showing pockets of resistance across the planet. We're evolving. The abandoned particle accelerator complex in Chile had become something entirely unexpected. A cathedral of improvised warfare. Holographic displays cascaded with alien schematics, while workstations buzzed with a frantic energy that defied the global catastrophe outside. Dr. Maya Krishnamurthy stood at the epicenter, her neural interface crackling with quantum possibilities. The device in front of her was neither human nor Krillak's. It was something entirely new. A hybrid system that merged captured alien technology with humanity's most radical theoretical physics. We're not reverse engineering, she muttered to Dr. Chen, who was analyzing a molecular breakdown of Krillak's armor. We're rewriting the fundamental language of technology. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A team of climate engineers, refugee programmers, and retired military cryptographers had discovered a critical vulnerability in the Krillak's computational matrix. Their communication network, so precise it seemed infallible, had an organic weakness, a biological computational approach that assumed absolute predictability. Humans, by contrast, thrived on chaos. Sergeant Armstrong's Special Operations Team demonstrated this principle in real time. Using a captured Krillak's tactical drone, they'd developed a viral computational algorithm that didn't just disrupt alien systems, it infected them with unpredictability. In the skies above the Atacama Desert, their first test played out. A Krillak's reconnaissance ship suddenly began performing impossible maneuvers. Its own navigation systems turned against it, interpreting standard flight paths as complex evasive maneuvers. The ship twisted and turned, its biomechanical systems fighting against an internal logic that no longer made sense. Captain Rodriguez watched the live feed, a rare smile crossing her face. They understand mathematics, she said, but they've never understood creativity. The viral algorithm was more than a weapon. It was a philosophical statement, a demonstration that human innovation could transform technological warfare into something the Krillak's could never anticipate. Deep in an underground facility, Zara, the quantum computing specialist, had developed something even more radical. A communication network that didn't just resist Krillak's interception, but actively used their own systems against them. Each transmission was a quantum puzzle, simultaneously existing in multiple states until observed. They're trying to predict our next move, Zora explained to her team. But we don't even know our next move until we make it. The hybrid technology wasn't just about warfare. It represented a fundamental reimagining of what technology could be. Captured Krellak's energy systems were being transformed into adaptive power sources. Their computational matrices were becoming networks of resistance. Dr. Chen looked at the evolving technological landscape and saw something beyond survival. This was evolution in real time, not just of technology, but of human potential. "We're not just fighting," he said quietly, watching a holographic model of their latest quantum hybrid system pulse with impossible geometries. "We're becoming something new." The abandoned lunar research station had become an unlikely fortress. Stripped of its scientific equipment, it now hummed with a different kind of energy, a nerve center for humanity's most unconventional warfare. Specialist Amani Okoro stood before a holographic display that was part war room, part psychological profile. Her background in synopsychology had become humanity's most unexpected weapon. The Krellaks weren't just facing a military resistance. They were confronting a species they fundamentally misunderstood. "They see patterns," Okoro explained to Captain Rodriguez. "We create chaos." Their first major psychological operation targeted the Krellaks' most fundamental weakness, their belief in absolute predictability. Using a combination of quantum-encrypted transmissions and carefully crafted misinformation, human resistance cells began to systematically unravel the alien invaders' strategic confidence. On the methane seas of Titan, Surgeon Armstrong led a mission that was equal parts special operations and performance art. A carefully orchestrated series of attacks appeared to follow a predictable pattern, right up until the moment they didn't. Krellak's tactical units found themselves responding to threats that materialized in impossible locations, following strategies that defied their computational models. Dr. Chen's team had discovered something profound about Krellak's communication. Their vast neural network, so advanced it seemed like pure logic, actually relied on a form of collective consciousness that was paradoxically rigid. Every piece of information was validated against a massive database of historical precedents. Humans, by contrast, lived for the unexpected. A transmission intercepted from a Krellak's command vessel revealed growing confusion. Their tactical analyses were breaking down. Predictive models that had worked flawlessly across hundreds of conquered civilizations were falling apart when confronted with human resistance. "We're not just fighting," Rodriguez noted, studying the transmission. "We're teaching them a new way of thinking." The psychological warfare extended beyond military tactics. Resistance cells began broadcasting everything the Krellaks least expected: art, music, random mathematical sequences that defied pattern recognition. Each transmission was a puzzle, a challenge to the aliens' understanding of intelligence. On Europa, a group of human survivors transformed an ice mining facility into a broadcast station. They transmitted everything from children's laughter to complex mathematical theorems, interspersed with tactical data designed to drive the Krellaks' computational systems into recursive loops. Zara, the quantum communication specialist, had developed a transmission protocol that was part communication, part psychological warfare. "We're not just sending messages," she explained, her eyes bright with a kind of scientific mischief. "We're forcing them to question their entire understanding of communication." The Krellaks had conquered civilizations by understanding them completely. Humanity was proving that true understanding was impossible when faced with genuine creativity. "They came expecting a war," Okoro said, watching the holographic display pulse with unexpected data patterns. "We're giving them an existential crisis." The conflict had transformed into something beyond traditional warfare. Deep within the radiation-shielded caverns of Olympus Mons, Dr. Elena Volkov manipulated a holographic ecosystem of technological evolution that defied conventional understanding. Her team wasn't just developing weapons. They were cultivating a living technological response to the Krellaks' invasion. Biological computing had always been a theoretical frontier. Now, it was humanity's most potent weapon. Volkov's breakthrough combined genetic engineering, quantum computing, and a radical approach to adaptive technology. Each device, each weapon system, was not just a tool, but a living organism capable of learning, adapting, and mutating in real time. Sergeant Kyle Armstrong watched the demonstration with a mixture of scientific fascination and warrior's pragmatism. The current prototype looked like nothing so much as a metallic organism, a drone that could reshape its molecular structure based on environmental challenges. "It's not about building the perfect weapon," Volkov explained, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "It's about creating intelligence that thrives on uncertainty." A captured Krelax communication array sat dismantled in the corner of the lab, a testament to how far human understanding had come. What once seemed like incomprehensible alien technology was now becoming a framework for unprecedented innovation. Captain Rodriguez received real-time updates from resistance cells across the solar system. The war had become a multi-dimensional chess match where the board itself was constantly changing. Humanity's greatest strength emerged not from superior firepower, but from an unprecedented ability to reimagine the very nature of conflict. In the methane seas of Titan, a modified human strike team demonstrated the new adaptive technology. Their environmental suits were living systems, reshaping themselves to counteract Krelax weapon signatures milliseconds before impact. Camouflage was no longer about hiding. It was about constant, instantaneous transformation. Dr. Marcus Chen's research team had uncovered something even more profound. The Krelax invasion wasn't just a military operation. It was a systematic attempt to categorize and control. Their entire technological approach relied on a fundamental belief that intelligence could be mapped, predicted, contained. Humans were proving them spectacularly wrong. A transmission intercepted from a Krelax command vessel revealed growing confusion. Their tactical models were collapsing under the weight of human unpredictability. Each engagement rewrote the rules of engagement in real time. Zara, the quantum communication specialist, had developed transmission protocols that were living systems themselves. "We're not just sending messages," she told Rodriguez, her eyes bright with a kind of scientific excitement. "We're creating ecosystems of information that evolve faster than they can be understood." The Lunar Research Station had become something between a scientific laboratory and a philosophical battleground. Humanity wasn't just fighting an invasion. They were challenging the very concept of technological determinism. They came expecting to conquer. Dr. Volkov said, watching a prototype adaptive drone reshape itself in real time. "They're discovering something far more dangerous." The living weapon pulsed with an intelligence that was unmistakably human, unpredictable, creative, boundless. The Krelax High Council chamber pulsed with an uneasy silence. Holographic displays flickered with increasingly fragmented data, a metaphor for their crumbling invasion strategy. High Executor Zornak's neural implants struggled to process the impossible data streams. Humanity was not just resisting. They were systematically dismantling the fundamental assumptions of Krelax military doctrine. "This is impossible," whispered Sub-Executor Krell, her biomechanical tendrils writhing with what could only be described as fear. "No species has ever." Zornak's response was cut short by another incoming transmission. Each communication from the human resistance was a psychological weapon, designed to erode the collective consciousness of the Krelax command structure. Meanwhile, deep within the converted research facility at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, Captain Alina Rodriguez orchestrated a symphony of controlled chaos. The facility was less a military base and more a living organism of human resistance, each section capable of independent action, yet perfectly synchronized. Dr. Imani Okoro stood at the central analysis hub, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that mapped the psychological landscape of the conflict. "They're breaking," she said quietly to Rodriguez. "Not just militarily. Philosophically." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A team of linguists, cryptographers, and quantum communication specialists had discovered something profound about the Krelax collective consciousness. Their entire civilization was built on a foundational belief of absolute predictability, a belief that human resistance was systematically destroying. On the frozen plains of Europa, Sergeant Kyle Armstrong led a strike team that was part military operation, part performance art. Their movements defied not just tactical analysis, but the very concept of tactical planning. Each mission was improvised to the point of seeming randomness, yet ultimately precise. Dr. Marcus Chen's latest project was perhaps their most audacious yet. They were no longer just fighting the Krulax invasion. They were fundamentally rewriting the rules of interspecies conflict. A captured Krulax strategic node revealed the depth of their confusion. Human resistance cells were broadcasting everything the aliens least expected. Complex mathematical theorems that contained hidden tactical information, art that served as communication encryption, music that disrupted computational processes. Zara, the quantum communication specialist, had developed transmission protocols that were living systems themselves. "We're not just sending messages," she explained, her eyes bright with scientific mischief. "We're forcing them to question their entire understanding of intelligence." The Krulax had conquered civilizations by understanding them completely. Humanity was proving that true understanding was impossible when faced with genuine creativity. High Executor Zornak stared at the deteriorating holographic displays, experiencing something unprecedented in Krulax history, a sensation that closely resembled doubt. Humanity wasn't just fighting an invasion. They were challenging the very concept of technological determinism. The battle for human survival had transcended traditional warfare. At the heliopause, the mysterious boundary where solar wind meets interstellar space, humanity staged its most audacious confrontation. Commander Area Santiago controlled the operation from a command center that was part spacecraft, part living neural network. Each human vessel was no longer just a ship, but a collaborative organism. Quantum-entangled communication systems allowed for instantaneous, near-telepathic coordination that defied the Krulax understanding of fleet tactics. "We're not fighting," Santiago murmured to her tactical eye. "We're performing." The Krulax invasion fleet approached in their traditional geometric formation, a mathematical precision that had conquered countless civilizations. They expected submission. They would receive something entirely different. Dr. Elena Volkov's adaptive technology manifested in ways the aliens could never have anticipated. Human ships didn't just maneuver. They transformed. Molecular structures shifted. Energy signatures danced. Computational matrices rewrote themselves in milliseconds. Sergeant Kyle Armstrong led a specialized boarding team that was part special operations, part xenoanthropological investigation. Their mission wasn't just to disable Krulax ships, but to understand them from the inside. Each piece of captured technology was a Rosetta Stone of alien methodology. The quantum communication specialist, Zara Chen, had developed a transmission protocol that was a work of art as much as a weapon system. Encrypted messages wove through the fabric of space-time, creating interference patterns that disrupted Krulax computational networks. High above the methane clouds of Titan, a human resistance cell had transformed an entire moon into a massive computational node. Abandoned mining equipment, scientific instruments, and improvised technology created a planetary-scale computational weapon. Dr. Marcus Chen watched the operation unfold, understanding that this was more than a military engagement. It was a philosophical argument written in the language of physics and information theory. The Krulax fleet began to fragment, not through conventional weapons, but through a systematic deconstruction of their fundamental operational assumptions. Ships began to turn on each other, computational matrices collapsing under the weight of uncertainty. Captain Elena Rodriguez coordinated the final stage of the operation. It wasn't about destruction. It was about demonstration. Humanity wasn't seeking vengeance. They were offering a radical alternative to the Krulax's understanding of civilization. A final transmission burst from the human fleet, a complex mathematical theorem that was simultaneously a weapon, a communication protocol, and a philosophical treatise. It contained the DNA of human potential. unpredictability, creativity, boundless adaptation. The Krillx invasion fleet began to dissolve, not in explosions, but in a cascade of computational uncertainty. "We didn't just win a war," Rodriguez said quietly, watching the holographic displays. "We redefined the very concept of conflict." The United Planetary Assembly convened in a structure that was neither building nor ship, a floating nexus of transparent metamaterials that seemed to breathe with living light. Representatives from Earth and the newly contacted galactic civilizations gathered, witnessing something unprecedented. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood not as a military leader, but as a diplomat of a fundamentally transformed humanity. The Krillx delegation sat in carefully constructed containment fields, not as prisoners, but as students. Dr. Marcus Chen presented the comprehensive report. It wasn't a military briefing, but a philosophical dissertation on the nature of intelligence, adaptation, and potential. "We didn't defeat an invasion," Chen explained, his holographic presentation dancing with complex mathematical and biological models. "We demonstrated a different approach to existence." The surviving Krillx high executor, stripped of command but granted sanctuary, listened with what could only be described as a form of profound respect. Their entire civilization was undergoing a radical revaluation of its foundational principles. Sergeant Kyle Armstrong now led a new kind of diplomatic course. Specialists trained not in combat, but in cross-species communication and adaptive diplomacy. The skills that had been honed in war were now being applied to understanding and collaboration. Dr. Elena Volkov's research team had become the most sought-after scientific group in known space. Their work on adaptive technologies was rewriting the fundamental understanding of biological and computational systems. Universities and research institutions from dozens of civilizations competed for their insights. Zara Chen, no longer just a quantum communication specialist, but a recognized sinolinguistic genius, demonstrated communication protocols that bridged not just language, but entire ways of perceiving reality. The transformation wasn't just technological or diplomatic. Human society had fundamentally changed. The global unity forged during the invasion didn't dissolve. Instead, it became a new model of collaborative existence. Space exploration accelerated at an unprecedented rate. The technologies developed during the conflict became the foundation of a new era of interstellar understanding. Humanity was no longer just a species defending itself. It was a civilization of infinite potential. On the lunar research station that had been the crucible of resistance, a memorial stood, not of victory, but of transformation. It was a complex sculpture that was simultaneously a work of art, a mathematical theorem, and a living computational system. The Krillx high executor approached Rodriguez during a diplomatic reception. No translation was necessary. The gesture was universal, a recognition of something profound. "You did not just survive," the alien representative communicated through a complex neural interface. "You reimagined the very concept of survival." Rodriguez looked out at the vast expanse of space, no longer a battlefield, but a canvas of infinite possibilities. Humanity had not just survived an invasion. They had been transformed into something entirely new.